The Mistletoe Bough is a British Gothic horror trick film written by E.T. Bailey and directed by Percy Stow. Released in 1904, its stars are uncredited, as was typical for the time. At 8 minutes and 12 seconds, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for ages 10 and up due to some mildly disturbing themes. The Legend of the Mistletoe Bough is a classic British folktale, initially inspired by English poet Samuel Rogers' 1822 poem, Ginevra. Published in his book of poetry titled Italy, it tells the story of a wealthy young bride who becomes trapped in a chest while playing hide-and-seek on her wedding night. Despite the exhaustive search efforts of her groom, father, and wedding attendees, she is never found, dying either of starvation or suffocation. Decades later, after her loved ones have died, new residents move into her family's manor and find the chest, discovering inside, to their horror, a skeleton wearing a wedding ring. It wasn't until the 1830s, when a song was written based on the poem, that the tale gained widespread notoriety. Titled The Mistletoe Bough, it was written by the British poet T.H. Bailey and composer Sir Henry Bishop, and it was a runaway success. By 1859, it was a Christmas-time staple, sung in homes across Great Britain because if Victorians could be relied upon for anything, it was to be as weird as possible. Christmas was a time for candlelit trees, puddings, and young brides dying in small spaces on their wedding nights. In any event, the tale greatly impacted popular culture, with many old estates claiming that it was a true story that happened on their grounds, and several classic works being influenced by it, including the short story The Romance of Certain Old Clothes by Henry James, which some people will be familiar with for its inclusion in the miniseries The Haunting of Bly Manor. But before any other works influenced by the song were adapted, there came the 1904 adaptation. This has become a common refrain on my channel, but we just don't know much about the production of this film. Even its writer, E.T. Bailey, is a mystery, seeming to have never written anything else, at least as far as I can find. Its director, Percy Stow, is not as obscure. He was a British man from London who co-founded the film studio the Clarendon Film Company with Henry Vassall Lawley. Initially started in 1904 to sell film equipment, the studio graduated to making short films as a side business. Stow ended up directing 294 films at least, though a great deal of them appear to be lost media. His most famous film is probably his 1908 adaptation of William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. Sadly, as far as this movie goes, we don't even know where filming took place, though part of it was obviously shot on site at some kind of estate. It's also worth noting that this is one of the first Gothic horror films ever made. For those curious, Gothic horror is a subgenre that was born from the Romantic movement, an artistic and intellectual movement that took place in much of Europe towards the end of the 18th century. Gothic horror is predicated upon a sense of both pervasive terror and wonder, a fixation on the sublime, passion, and holding emotions over logic. It often focuses heavily upon topics like death, decay, madness, and the fading of bygone eras. And while it's not essential, Gothic stories are often set in old locations, like castles, manors, and abbeys, i.e. places with Gothic architecture from which the genre gets its name. If you want prime mainstream examples of Gothic fiction, you need only turn to Bram Stoker's Dracula or a huge portion of Edgar Allan Poe's work. Many more subgenres have sprouted from this one, including Southern Gothic, Russian Gothic, and Contemporary Gothic, but the Mistletoe Bough is firmly rooted in the traditional. This film is very faithful to its source, though with a slight supernatural twist. In the film, a bride suggests a game of hide-and-seek on her wedding night, before fleeing to a remote part of the estate. She hides in a chest that locks behind her, and is left to die when no one is able to find her. 30 years later, her ghost appears before her still grieving husband, climbing out of a chest and leading him to find her corpse. This movie is a solid okay. I think one of its biggest drawbacks is that the song's version of the story just isn't complex enough to sustain an over 8-minute long film. There's no real characterization or spectacle here to be found, and only the barest of plots. As a song, The Mistletoe Bough works because it's fairly short and its central element is the horror it invokes, when it makes you consider what it would be like to slowly die in a tiny space, your loved ones within reach but unable to locate you. As a film, though, the horror is kind of removed. We don't see any of the bride's perspective once she's inside of the trunk. She becomes a footnote in the story, which feels simultaneously drawn out and kind of rushed. No time is put into helping us get to know the characters, building dread, or showing the trapped woman's struggle. Instead, time is wasted on inconsequential things like random slapstick and the guests searching and searching and searching. It really makes you want to fast forward to get to the grisly discovery because that's the only remaining source of drama. The British Film Institute released a shortened version of this film that doesn't even crack 3 minutes, and it is so much better, capturing the essence of the story without a second wasted. As far as performances go, everyone's pretty solid. The bride's cute and playful, the search party members convey their concern, and the groom's later horror, while certainly hammy by today's standards, is par for the course for early silent cinema. And on a technical level, it's decent. The costumes and some of the sets are fine, though a few sets are admittedly downright bad. I cannot tell what this black void is meant to be, maybe a dark hallway. It's rough. But the on-site exteriors are lovely, and I was pretty fond of the simple stairwell set. The shots are also a little varied for the time, with a mix of full shots and wide shots, as well as some interesting framing. And special effects-wise, the dissolves are really good. Overall, I am going to give The Mistletoe Bough a 2 out of 5. It's by no means terrible, it just tries to wring too much out of a limited story. I recommend it to anyone with any interest in British folktales or early Gothic cinema, though I would really urge you to check out the shortened version released by the BFI instead. It's the perfect length and far more enjoyable as a result. Content warning: this film contains brief, non-graphic sexual harassment. The Diable Noir, released as The Black Imp in English, is a French occult horror comedy trick film written, directed, and edited by Georges Méliès. Released in 1905, it also stars Méliès as the Traveler, with the rest of the cast going uncredited. At 3 minutes and 53 seconds, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for ages 10 years and up due to a brief, non-graphic instance of sexual harassment. As with many of Méliès's films, we don't know much about the production of The Black Imp, except that it was likely filmed at Méliès's home studio outside of Paris and was released by his production company, Star Film Company. Méliès would have also worked, at least in part, on the design and creation of the film's sets, costumes, and special effects, which include pyrotechnics and substitution splicing. After arriving at an inn and attempting to come onto one of the maids, a man finds himself tormented by his new room's secret occupant, a devilish imp. The imp engages in all manner of shenanigans, including teleporting furniture, summoning countless chairs, and lighting the bed on fire. Ultimately, the man is blamed for the room's destruction and chased out of the inn by the furious staff, much to the imp's amusement. Not very long ago, I shared my review of Georges Méliès's comedic ghost film, The Apparition, or Mr. Jones' comical experience with a ghost. In it, I talked about how the film felt in many ways like a remake of Méliès's 1897 film, The Bewitched Inn, which featured the same concept of a wary traveler being tormented by moving objects in an inn room. I also said that The Apparition felt like an example of artistic growth due to a crude experience and budget, with Méliès enhancing the Bewitched Inn's bare-bones concept with added characterization, plot, and a subtle message about the treatment of women. I'm mentioning all this now because if the apparition was an improvement on the Bewitched Inn, then the Black Imp is nothing more than a retread of the apparition. I think part of the reason that this film falls behind the apparition in quality is because it just isn't interesting enough to fuel its own length. It drags. Méliès clearly wanted to do more, to go bigger, and that would be fine if he had been working with more complex storytelling or more exciting gags. But he wasn't. There's no new jokes, no added depth to the characters. The core plot plays out almost identically to the apparitions, but without the added justice of a female ghost driving away a lecture. It really feels like he may have thought longer means better. This film's strength lies entirely in its performances and technical aspects. I shouldn't really have to say it at this point if you've watched my prior reviews or seen any Méliès films yourself, but Méliès gives it 110%. He is lively and silly and throws himself into stunts head first, probably injuring himself as he went. The Imp's actor matches his energy and enthusiasm perfectly, leaping and jigging all over the place. You can feel how much fun they were having making this, and that part is contagious. All of that is further lifted up by how good the special effects are. While at this point in cinema history, substitution splices were no longer revolutionary, I would argue the way they're used in the chair sequence here is. There are 61 splices used, and they're implemented in a varied and well-timed fashion. Even if the sequence feels overlong for me from a storytelling perspective, I can't help but be impressed. I'm sure at the time this went pretty crazy. The burning bed is also great, and extra impressive when you remember they did not have safety regulations at this time on sets. Portable fire extinguishers certainly existed at this point, but based on what I know about early filmmaking, I'd be really shocked if they had one on hand. So it's pretty nuts that they did this. Overall, I had trouble rating this film. I vacillated between being bored with a familiar story and being impressed by all the skill that went into executing it. Méliès certainly struggled as time went on with variety. There is really no arguing that. But man, he could put together a spectacle. So I'm going to give The Black Imp a 2 out of 5. I recommend it to Méliès completionists and people with an interest in early special effects, but otherwise I would just suggest checking out his films The Apparition or The Bewitched Inn instead. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I really appreciate it. For my next video, I will be reviewing the 1905 French occult trick film The Infernal Cave and the 1906 occult horror comedy trick film The Merry Frolics of Satan. If you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would be very appreciated, and you can follow me on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram at Under the Fleapit. If you like what I do and you want to support the channel, my Patreon and Ko-fi are both linked in the description. Until next time, this has been Under the Fleapit. Stay spooky!